What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and MSI starts tomorrow morning. This is a late video, but I think even after the first day of games, it'll be somewhat relevant, like just to get some general thoughts about the different teams. I am welcoming Billy back to the channel. Billy Von Eld, how's it going, man? Talking a little NFL. That's been kind of the only thing going on since the last time we talked.
Absolutely. Well, and my Sixers are in first place. Got my
Knicks are in
second
fourth.
vaccine.
Kind of
What's that?
insane. The Knicks are in fourth. It's pretty insane right now.
Yeah. The big chatter here among my Sixers friends is we need to make sure we lock down that first seed so that we get the 4-5 winner and not the 2-3 winner. But
Yeah.
I'm sure that'll come back to bite us as the Knicks are upsetting the Sixers in the second round.
No, that's not going to happen. But I was saying before, one of my friends is a Cardinals fan. He's also a Hawks fan. So first he gets Rondale Moore when I wanted the Giants to take Rondale Moore, and then if it's Knicks Hawks in like the 4-5 or whatever round that would be worst case scenario because he kind of goes off the handle sometimes and like gets very upset about stuff, and that will make the office very on edge for about a week and a half. So we can avoid that. If we could avoid that, that'd be great.
Absolutely.
But basically, for this video, we have some ego ranking stuff. Billy has gotten a lot of that legwork done for tomorrow. We have opinions on the games for tomorrow, so we're going to go through each of the games. We're going to make a tier list on Tier Maker of all the teams, and we'll get more into the specifics on that when we get to that point of the video. But to start, it's probably more beneficial for us to just start looking at the games for tomorrow. So before we jump into that, was there anything else you wanted to mention, Billy, about how you've looked at the team so far?
Not really.
Then we'll go into the games.
Yeah. I think that works.
All right. So the first game, and probably the most exciting game on the slate tomorrow from a narrative perspective, is Dom1 Gaming, the world champions, against Cloud9. And there's been a lot of talk surrounding this game. The players are kind of trolling one another on social media. Like Perks and Showmaker have gone back and forth talking about how like they're gonna play each other. And like I think the last time basically it was just Showmaker and Perks talking trash, which is pretty cool. And that's one of the things that I love about Cloud9 and like Perks and how good their roster is that they can talk without seeming completely foolish because they are a legitimately good team. Their talent level is either I don't know if it's the highest it's ever been in North America relative to the rest of the world, just because like back in the day it was probably a little bit close before the huge gap started between the East and the West. But Cloud9 is a legitimate team in my mind. They were a little slow in the NALCS, but ultimately they got there, and they kind of turned into what we thought they would be. So, Billy, how are you looking at these teams, and how is Ego looking at these teams going into the first game?
Yeah. So the way I use the sort of Ego platform or whatever you want to call it for these international matchups. Normally it's run on sort of a league contained basis. So it's just comparing 10 or, the 10 or 8 or in the LPL's case, 17 teams against each other on a scale. So to put that on a cross league scale, I use historical results from international competitions to sort of gauge the relative strength of the leagues, and then look at how those teams have done within the leagues, and just sort of take as a best guess that the relative strength of the leagues is about what it has been in the past. So that's what I posted the other day, and not much change. So I did something similar for Worlds 2020. Not a ton of change in terms of the relative strength of the leagues, but the LPL and LCK are sort of head and shoulders above the other regions, even the LEC and LCS. And I think, so within that, right, that sort of would give the advantage to DWG, obviously. Mm-hmm. And then even within that, I think based on the EGOT numbers, at least, C9 peaked a few weeks ago, sort of, I think, towards the end of the regular season and tapered off a little bit during the mid-season showdown in the LCS. So, right, it's sort of a weird situation. I find that sort of 2 to 3 months is the best look back often when using this data. And with the gap of a month between, or at least 2-3 weeks between the last time a lot of these teams played competitively, throws a little bit of a wrench. How well are they playing in scrims and things like that? It doesn't really get factored in. But between that and I think DWG had something similar, but came on a little bit strong in the finals. So, long story short, I think the numbers would definitely take DWG here.
Yeah, I haven't put much thought into this, but I wonder if you've made a similar observation. In a best of one league, would Ego swing more heavily during the playoffs? Because like if you're a team like Cloud9 or Team Liquid and you're playing all these best of ones and you have a 10-4 record, you get into a best of 5 where it's a closer series. You go 3-2. What is 3-2 equal? In terms of a win, does that seem like it's not equivalent to a 1-game win, right?
It really depends on the totality of the 5 games. So if they're all close, right, I think that's basically going to be the same as one close game.
Yeah.
But you could if you have 4 close games and 1 blowout, the blowout is going to basically be like 1 blowout win.
Yeah.
If you have a 3-0, then it's really going to be a big swing. And so it's sort of context dependent. But what you can really make up a lot, to your point, can make up a lot of ground. Right. When Mad Lions beat G2 in the LEC playoffs, it was a 3-1 win, I think. I just sort of trying to remember, but I
think it was 3-2, right?
What's that?
I think it was 3-2
or 3-2. But so either way, so we're getting 3 wins or sort of the net 1 win. Maybe I think a high sort of a 1 blowout win in there. But they had a huge swing where they jumped like 2 other teams, Rogue and I think Fnatic both from that. So you can still, I think it's right. It always runs off of 20 games or thereabouts. So, or I guess I should say running off of the same number of games. Mm-hmm. So it's just sort of, you can get a bigger swing because you're playing 3 games in one day, more so than series.
It's not. Yeah. That's kind of what I was getting at, was because it's shouldn't they be weighted more even, because it, and this would be like a quality adjustment where it's oh, well, in the most recent 20-game sample, we had games against Vitality and some other lower level teams in the LEC. Then you get into the playoffs, okay, well, we just played 5 games against Fnatic and our adjusted gold was more similar to this other number. I wonder if there's some way to kind of make sense of both of those things at the same time, where yes, you beat Vitality and you were expected to beat Vitality by between 2,000 to 4,000 gold and get a relatively easy victory, and then beating a team like G2 with a 2,000 to 4,000 gold lead, even though the gold is roughly the same, the fact that you did it speaks to some other kind of level of accomplishment as opposed to a 2,000 gold win over Vitality. But that's I guess that's qualitative stuff that's not really what Ego is trying to do. So it's probably
it is strength of schedule adjusted. So you get more credit for beating a good team by 2,000 gold than a bad team by 2,000 gold.
How much? How much is it weighted? Have we gone over that before? I thought it was relatively agnostic.
It's sort of right. So if you're playing DWG right now, is their absolute ego score is about 3,000 gold. So they would be expected to beat an average team by 3,000. If you beat them by 2,000 gold, it's going to move them down a little bit, but roughly you get credit for winning for beating an average team by 5,000 as opposed to beating a team by 2,000. Okay. But if you beat if you beat Rogue Warriors only by 5,000, that's basically what you're supposed to do because they lose to everybody by 5,000 gold.
Yeah, that's a really interesting thing that I think it's worth pushing on and thinking about in the future is for Dom 1 gaming, even though it's if you're saying the absolute value of it is basically the 3,000 gold and that's what they would do against the average team, I think the fact that their win rate against every single team should be over 50% or something. There's that magic number around the 2,000, 3,000 gold number where if you're going to win, you're going to win by roughly 2,000 to 3,000 gold at a minimum, no matter what. So it's more like Dom1 Gaming, even over the number 2 team, number 3 team, the expected gold that you're going to see at the end of a game is roughly 2 or 3,000 gold too, you know? Because like that's maybe that's not helpful. Because you're not trying to predict how much gold they're going to win by. You're basically saying like, yeah. Well, I mean, what were you gonna say? What were your thoughts on that?
No, so like the number is what they would do against an average team. So every team scores compared against that baseline. Mm-hmm. So I think we've talked before about how sort of that 2,000 to 3,000 gold a minute is sort of a key number for margin of victory. And so I think if the way I always look at it is if DWG is their raw scores 3,000, any team 1,000 or below, that's almost a lock for them to win. But if the team's above 1,000, then that's when you sort of get into not a coin flip, but the closer they are in score, the more likely it is that it's going to be a competitive match.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just give a rundown on the 2 teams. So with Dom1 Gaming, obviously, we don't need to say much. They're the best team in Korea. They're the best team in the world. A lot of people are still relatively low on Khan and like kind of saying that Khan's not good. Khan is very good relative to most players around the world. Khan can play the carry style and the tank style. It just depends on what the team is asking of them at any point in time. So I would definitely push back on a lot of people saying that's the question mark of the team. Like people who are watching this video, they may also be watching a lot of other like North American produced podcasts and stuff like that. It's really difficult to watch like the analysts and the casters from the major regions say stuff like that, because it's like, how could you possibly think that? Like, how could you possibly think that Khan is not good, or like not extremely good? Like the company line from like everybody on the West, in the West, that's like an on-air talent or something, should be like, oh yeah, Khan's really good, he's like a top 10 top laner in the world or something. But the way they talk about him, I just don't think that the public like understands the kind of distinction they're trying to make. So it makes everyone think he's so much worse than he really is. But Khan against like every single top laner at this tournament except for Xiaohu is like, he's much better than. That's basically it. A lot of people have been talking about Canyon recently. Canyon's obviously a very good player as well. I think that his jungle dominance is a little bit overstated at this point. Definitely a top 3 or 4 jungler in the world. There's no doubt about it. But their team has been so dominant. They've had so many great victories over great teams that I think it gets a little overblown. Like if you put them into a bad jungle matchup and they lose a game, it's going to look a lot worse. I'm not going to say, oh, Canyon sucks now. It's just like, that's a reality that people aren't ready to see. So when they see it on stage, if they get upset at some point by RNG or whatever, it's just going to make people make like ridiculous claims like, oh, little did we know Wei is actually the best jungler in the world or something like that. But Canyon against Blabber is actually one of the most interesting matchups I think we'll see in the group stage, or whatever the first stage of this is, because the champion pool for Blabber is extremely good on this patch, and that's one thing that I wanted to touch on early on in this video, is that the jungle shift we're going to see is very similar to the shift that we saw in the beginning of last summer when we got into the Graves meta. Like, that's the kind of evolution we're about to see in League of Legends, where we went from like a normal like a classic style into a Graves power farming carry jungler. Then we transitioned into like the Hecarim Udyr kind of jungle meta, and now we're going into it's probably going to be a more diverse meta where you have champions like Lee Sin, maybe Diana, maybe Rumble, maybe Morgana. You're going to have Volibear still around, probably. Hecarim will probably make an appearance still. Udyr will probably make an appearance still. But the question becomes, like, which junglers match up well against the other junglers, because stylistically they bring different things to the teams, and some of them are easier to play around than the others. So I think that if Cloud9 gets into a spot where they get Kindred or Lee Sin, I think they could have a very explosive early game against Damwon and then create a large enough gold advantage to kind of like white knuckle it to the finish line. That I think C9 can do it. I don't think many teams at this tournament can do that against Damwon. Because Damwon can also play the like tricky style of League of Legends where they force you into tough decisions. Showmaker against Perks. There's been a lot of talk, but I think that it's going to be a letdown matchup where they don't play as explosive as what they kind of suggested. That's a good DFS angle. I think is like not everybody, but a lot of people are going to try to get one of these two teams into their lineup because of the popularity and like we know them. But I could easily see this turning into like a 12-6 game where Cloud9 is just trying to prove themselves against the best team in the world. Damwon realizes like, we can just play this slow and win pretty easily, so let's not try to do anything stupid. And then Ghost and Barrel against Sven and Vulcan in the bot lane. It's another interesting spot because Sven is the kind of player who has a diverse champion pool. He's really good at Ezreal, which is going to be very good on this patch as well. Ghost and Barrel, they change up what they play pretty often. So I don't know if there's going to be a huge advantage in the laning phase, because if they pull out a Senna composition, then it's just not going to look like a dominant laning phase team. And that's basically it. I mean, I think C9 has legitimate chances to win. The money line is plus 340 for C9. I would probably consider doing that. I'm not betting on these games just because they're so insane. But plus 340 is pretty good. You're not going to bet Damwon Gaming minus 500. So that's basically it for the first game. Do you have any additional thoughts about C9 or Damwon, or any questions?
No, I think that all makes sense. I'm just looking at rough here. Yeah, I think it's a stay away or C9 on that line. I hadn't looked at that yet. And the only thing I think the jungle matchup is, as you said, is interesting. A few weeks ago, or I guess about a month or 6 weeks ago at this point, I posted sort of a ego-based individual player rankings for each of the 4 major regions, mm-hmm. and Blabber and Canyon were both probably unsurprisingly the top junglers in each of their leagues. Mm-hmm. On the con point, he sort of I think came on, but I think the whole DWG team came on stronger after this. Showmaker was ranked 3rd, which he's probably closer to the top with Chovy there. But Khan was right around average. So to your point, an LCK average top laner is nothing to sneeze at.
Oh yeah, for sure. Okay, so let's get into the second match. This is a pretty fun matchup, and for DraftKings purposes, these are the kinds of games that can like turn a slate on its head, because there's going to be so much attention on the teams that we know, where it's like, okay, Damwon Gaming, RNG, C9, Mad Lions, and PSG, everybody's going to play those teams because they're the most popular teams. They're thought of as the best teams that are going to be at this tournament, and they're favored. So people are just going to jam them into their lineups. I think that puts Detonation Focus Me into a good spot as one of the overlooked favorites. So the question becomes, are they legitimate favorites? So right now they're listed at minus 164, and Infinity is plus 124. I went through a decent amount of this in my Discord channel, and I think that in general, when we get to international tournaments, I focus on jungle more than anything, and I think that Detonation Focus Me has a legitimate advantage in the jungle. The main thing that I was looking for going through these players' champion pools were like win rate on Lee Sin. Do they play Kindred? What other kinds of junglers do they have really good win rates on? Because it's easy for these players to come back to champions that they've played for a long time without skipping a beat. And a champion like Lee Sin, after a lot of the recent buffs that he's gotten, is going to be a very strong champion in this type of meta because of the early game playmaking ability. And that's really what separates a lot of teams. Like when you get into Hecarim against Udyr for like 90% of the games that we've seen for the past couple of months, teams kind of understand roughly how that champion's going to play the early game. There are certain kind of gank paths that you have to watch out for, and teams can get prepared for that. When you have Lee Sin and stuff like that, you can take all these really aggressive lines and continuously gank in the early game. It's kind of an all or nothing approach to the game, where the downside is like you can get out farmed by the other team, and you're going to give up a lot of like standing gold that you could just like easily take off the map in the form of jungle camps. But the upside is that you're like killing someone, getting the gold for that, removing XP from the other team basically, and that's how you really see a lot of these huge snowballs happen. So I think that for the most part, Steel is who I'm focused on in this matchup specifically. What do you think about this matchup? Have you put any thought into this matchup yet?
Yeah, so I'll put this is one place where I still have some homework to do. I think the two things that I like to look at that I think are a little bit sort of just not as publicly accessible, or just haven't found a good spot for it, which is sort of half of why I do it, the stuff here in my spreadsheets. But one is, I think this is one for me where it will come down to how these teams have performed on an ego basis within their league. The LGL and CBLOL have been historically, in my numbers, the two sort of bottom tier leagues in these international tournaments. Mm-hmm. And the LLA has sort of been the next tier above them, along with the LCL and Oceania region. So, I think if I'll want to see Detonate maybe sort of head and shoulders above the other LGL teams to really have confidence in them as a pick. And also like to look at sort of the bloodiness of these regions, and sort of how, right, not just sort of each team's what they do in wins, but also sort of how slow the team that they're facing will play, and whether they're just going to get bogged down, even if they do look like a strong favorite. I want to say I feel like the LLA was a little bloody last year, but I remember being on Rainbow 7 a lot during Worlds, but yeah. So those will be two things that I'm looking at, and then I'll post some of this on Twitter later for anyone that might be interested.
Yeah, so with the LJL, one interesting narrative that's getting thrown around right now is that all the teams in LJL are really bad, and none of them understand how to punish Detonation Focus Me when they're in a winning position. That's probably better for DraftKings, that we're going to have teams that can push them. So if the LLA is bloodier when they're losing, and they have a better understanding of how to actually like poke holes in the winning team, then you're going to see more closely contested fights, which should lead to more fights, more opportunities to have like just kills and DraftKings scoring. So that doesn't really scare me. The thing that scares me is that Detonation Focus Me might just outright lose, and that like I have a lot of exposure to Detonation Focus Me tomorrow because of the earlier point that I was making about being an overlooked team that should, in my mind, win. And the other thing is, people are talking really highly about the mid laner from Detonation Focus Me, Arya, a younger player. The rest of the team is pretty consistent in terms of like they've been around for a long time, and they know how to play with one another, which is generally a good thing. I was looking at Steel once again, and their win rate throughout their career on Trundle is 77%. So if we stick with the Volibear, Udyr, Hecarim meta, I think a champion like Trundle can still be very viable because he had a recent pillar buff, which is gonna like allow him level 2, level 3, go to a lane, pop up his pillar. It's gonna slow everyone down like 5% more, which is actually pretty considerable in the early game before people have boots and stuff like that. So I do like Trundle a lot, and he's also good because he steals away a lot of tank stats from the other team. And when you get into these drafts, I would expect a lot of tanks to be blind picked because they think that they'll be relatively safe. The champion that I kind of have my eye out on from Steel specifically is Xin Zhao. He's seen a lot of he's been increased in popularity recently as well, because in the EU Masters, people were using him in combination with champions like Seraphine or Karma. These the Enchanter supports that can also sometimes play solo lanes and give really good buffs to like bruiser champions like Xin Zhao. So if that's the case, then Steel should be in a very good spot. And Arya does play Seraphine, so I think that is something within the realm of possibilities of happening for them. it's going to be a heartbreaker. Like I said, if Detonation Focus me loses, I will be very in a lot of trouble. Before I move on to the next game, I wanted to make a point about jungle in these kinds of international competitions, and the reason that jungle is so important is because it's League of Legends is very similar in my mind to Maslow's hierarchy of needs, the psychological thing where like you need to have your psychological needs taken care of, then your safety needs, belongingness and love and like all that kind of stuff, so that you can ultimately become self-actualized. So in this scenario, in League of Legends, you need, in order to win the game, you need to have a bunch of different things figured out. And the most important thing that's often overlooked is the early game. So in the early game, you need your laners to be able to lane, get some gold, and buy some items. Your jungler is going to be the biggest factor in your team's ability to stay close within the early game. You need junglers that are in good jungle matchups that aren't going to be invaded early on. You need junglers that can contest things like the Scuttle Crab, because otherwise you're just giving away between roughly 300 gold to the other team. They need to have good jungle pathing to stay on time, because again, if you're not being efficient with your clearing and everything like that, then you're going to just naturally fall behind. If no kills happened and one jungler is farming more efficiently than the other jungler, then the team with a more efficient jungler is going to just create a gigantic gold lead. So that's really what we want to see, is junglers who can control the tempo in the early game. If we see Volibear, Hecarim, Udyr, this is not going to matter. Everyone knows how to play that for the most part. Will you see some teams in the early game have a huge talent gap where they can test something that they shouldn't, get blown out of the water, lose by 10,000 gold? Yes, that's always a possibility. But just from like a game system perspective, that should not happen as often in those kinds of matchups, because they're known quantities. Like, we know what those junglers do, and we know how to play around that. So I think for the excitement level of the tournament, the best case scenario would be new jungle champions that people aren't used to. But, we'll just have to see how that goes tomorrow.
It's something I hadn't thought about, but it is interesting. I've been spending the last couple hours just importing all of the games from the different regions. And most of these teams have not played competitively past 11-6, in some cases
11-5, yeah.
And so you've had a ton of change to the game since the last time we saw teams out there. So people might have some would hope some creative stuff and some new stuff along the lines of what you're talking about that they're going to bust out.
Yeah, there's been a lot of talk about. It's funny because League of Legends, every time a patch changes, everyone's opinion on every champion should kind of change, because the relative strength of champions is all determined by what's happening with the other champions. If one champion gets a ridiculous buff and becomes the most important champion in League of Legends, then every other champion is secondary. It's like, this one is the one we need to think about. Do we ban it? Yes or no? Do we play it? Yes or no? And then how do we build our team off of that? Which creates
Tristana early in season 11, right?
Yeah. Or like Hecarim. Hecarim got to the point where it's like, well, I don't really want to ban it, because then there's Udyr and stuff like that. So we're just going to trade it almost every single time for the entire season. Or Seraphine. By the time that Seraphine was nerfed once or twice, she started becoming very popular in pro play. And then even after her nerfs, teams understood how to play her better, and they just continued to play her because she's very strong. So it's an interesting balancing act with a lot of these teams. A lot of teams, most people that play League of Legends miss out on the overpowered stuff because other people aren't doing it and they're not willing to change the status quo. You see that all the time. Right now, there are champions that are not being played that are extremely strong. They're just not played. That's just the way that it is. It takes teams
it's really
with
interesting, right? Because you made the point earlier, right? You have sort of an institutional structure with the competitive teams that is very conservative in the way they play the game, but your fan base is just unbelievably reactionary, and every single game changes everybody's opinion on every single thing about every single player.
Yes.
And so it just creates this tension where it's like, why aren't you changing everything? And teams are like, well, we're not going to change anything.
Yeah. And And I think it's funny because I think they're both wrong. Like,
Yeah,
that's the sad part of the whole thing.
it's like, yeah, you're two extremes with nothing in the middle, which is usually where you want to be.
Yeah, it's tough. Convincing players to try out new stuff is more difficult than them learning the new champion. Like, there are so many skills that translate from champion to champion. People make way too much out of like specific matchups and stuff like that. You're not trying to, for the most part, you're not trying to squeeze every advantage out of the laning phase. Like, yes, if you're playing like a lane that like loses extremely hard, like Galio against Lucian or something like that, and he's just gonna shoot you a million times, and Galio is going to like not be able to farm. Yes, that's a problem. Don't draft like that. That's all you need to do is not draft yourself into that situation, and you're gonna be fine. The next match, RNG against Pentanet. RNG is going to win that game 99 times out of 100. If Pentanet wins, then I will lose. If they are the most important team on tomorrow's slate, I will make $0. Completely fine with that. I don't know anything about Oceania at this point. I know that their professional league folded in on itself last year, so this is some kind of like offshoot league or something like that. It's personally, I don't think it's worth spending much time on. Did you have any comments about either one of these teams? Like, if you want to take a minute to talk about RNG or something like that.
Yeah, I mean, I think RNG is going to smash. I think for a long time they were, for pretty much the entire season, up near the top of the LPL, which came out as the strongest region in the league by league rankings. I think that my sense is the LCO might be a little bit stronger than the OPL. It seems like they've brought in like Direwolves and some of these teams that had previously been in like the PCS and VCS, which have been, at least by my numbers, better, leads with better competition. Mm-hmm. So I think maybe the top team from Oceania will be better than sort of what we have historically seen. But even so, I think it's sort of a bottom third league among the competitors here, and they're probably playing what I'd say, for my money, the two best teams here at MSI are probably RNG or DWG, which isn't anything super controversial, but I don't see anything that says they're not.
Yeah. Okay, that's fine. Not really much to get into. Pentanet against Unicorns of Love, so I guess this is a good time to talk about Unicorns of Love. Unicorns of Love. We saw them at Worlds last year. They were very interesting. They actually played a lot of close matches in the play-in stage. Did they get out of the play-in stage? I forget if they got out or not. But a lot of the players are familiar for that reason, and I think that we should just instantly assume that they're better than Pentanet. They still have Sheepy. Sheepy's a very good coach. There was a little while when Xerxes was their jungler that they were like one of the best teams in Europe. They just didn't get past the final hurdle. But Sheepy's a really good coach, so I trust that Sheepy is going to have them focused and ready to beat up on Pentanet. Like, it doesn't seem like the kind of team that's going to let this free win pass them by.
Yeah. So I've got their match history up here. It's the same basic. It's the same roster as last year, except they swapped out their ADC. It was Gadget, who I forget which team he was on. He was on one of the teams in the EUM this year. But Boss, I remember, just was like the man at Worlds and was just crushing everybody. So they did not make it out of groups. They did. I'm sorry. They made it out of the play-in, but then they went 0-6 in the main event.
Yeah.
But they swapped the ADCs about halfway through the season and went 4-5 in Lodic's first 5 games and have gone 5-1 in the last 5. So who knows, right? That's the playoffs that they've been on a streak in. So presumably they're playing the better teams in the LCL. Grades out as one of the stronger regions. I think they have one of the best names out there. I wish they would throw Sexy Edition back on there and jazz it up a little bit. But yeah, I when they are on the slate, I'll probably be on them. But not much you can do with them tomorrow from a DraftKings perspective.
Yes. Well, some would say there's nothing you can do with them, unless there's like small slates. I don't know if there's any smaller slates. The one thing I don't like about Unicorns of Love,
actually, there's a 3-gamer. Now I think the late slate's a 3-gamer with
them. Okay.
And the other 2.
So probably the most upset that I've been in the past week is when I learned that Ahaha Sick, their name is actually Ananasik, and like H's in Russian are pronounced as N's or something like that. I thought that his name was Ahaha, like laughing, and then sick, like how we would say it in colloquially in English. That would be a great name. Someone needs to get that
name. Same thing, and I'm
it's sad.
Equally heartbroken right now.
It's upsetting. It's a great name. It's a cool name, regardless. It sounds really cool. If it was like that next level of ahaha sick, like making fun of people, it'd be amazing. But that's fine. I do think that I'll be on them in some of their closer matchups in the future. But actually, are they in like the group with just 3 teams? Oh, that sucks. Oh, you can't play them against RNG, and you have to play them against Pentanet. That's basically it. That's so bad. We're not going to have any interesting matchups to like squeeze value out of them. How many teams get out from each group? Is it 1 or 2? Top 4.
Oh, sorry. The
top 2 teams from each group advance to stage 2. So Unicorns of Love should be in the next group. That's when it's going to be really cool to see what they can actually do. If they don't get out of this group, it's going to be very sad. It's going to be tough to get a read on them and like take their games from this part of the tournament seriously, because RNG should run away with this group. So if
very clear tiers.
Yeah, if UOL takes a game off of RNG, then people will overrate U of L. If U of L drops a game to Pentanet, they will underrate them. That's basically just what's going to happen. Let's move on to the next game. Istanbul Wildcats against Pain Gaming. This is another very important matchup for DraftKings because you're not going to feel great about either team. Like, just the fact that they're 2 lesser-known teams, that's just generally how this stuff works. Personally, I will not play any Pain Gaming. Or at least I don't think I'm going to play any Pain Gaming. Because they are the kind of team that, in wins, has very low kills per win. I'm pretty sure I was looking at it like throughout the playoffs and stuff like that. And Pain Gaming, when they're winning, they're like, okay, well, we have an advantage over you. We don't have to fight you if we don't want to fight you ever. So we'll probably cap out around 14 to 16 kills in our higher games. But generally, it's more of like a 12 kill per win kind of team. It'll be interesting to see if like we have some bloody losers, because that will always drive up the kills for Pain Gaming. And the other difficult thing here is that the only time that we hear about Turkey is when we hear about players like Armut or Broken Blade or Closer, or players who have moved away from Turkey, and people have these good feelings about Turkey. So the narrative is, oh, Turkey must be good. They have a lot of these players who come out of this region and end up being good on relatively good teams. The narrative surrounding Brazil is, haha, Brazil's horrible. These players stink, and everything about Brazil's horrible. That's just basically how most people look at them. So from a narrative perspective, I would love to play Pain Gaming, where it's like, okay, Istanbul's overrated because everybody thinks that these good players are indicative of like a regional strength in general, and then Brazil somehow is underrated. I don't know. That's kind of the line that you'd have to take to get them to get Pain Gaming into some of your lineups. In reality, I think, get limited exposure to Istanbul Wildcats in combination with some of the other favorites that are not Dom1 Gaming and RNG, and you might actually get a unique lineup out of it, where people just aren't... People are going to try to jam as much win equity into their lineup as possible, unless they're playing 50 lineups like Billy does, where he might have, 10 or 15, 20% to Istanbul Wildcats, where other people who are playing 5 lineups, they're just not going to get there, So... Have you built your lineups yet? Do you know if you're going to have any exposure to Brazil?
I have not built any lineups yet. We'll be doing that later tonight. But, this will be one where, again, I'll be interested to see where the teams come out within their own leagues in the league-by-league rankings. Right, and so as you were laying all of that out, it makes perfect sense to me. But I feel like I'm going to end up on the TCL chalk.
For sure, yeah.
So CBLOL came out, as I said, with LGL as the sort of bottom two teams by a decent margin. TCL actually grades out as the best of the non-major regions, along with sort of I grouped together all of the Southeast Asian leagues like the VCS, the PCS, and some of the historical leagues there. So I think on that you sort of have a team coming from one of the strongest leagues and a team coming from one of the weaker leagues. I remember Pain Gaming last year was like the bane of my existence when I played CBLL states. I always loved Santos Esports, and they were hot early.
Oh my god! You're gonna break my heart. They were the best. They were the best. Rainbow,
I loved it.
Jackpot. Oh my god.
So good. And then and Pain Gaming just sort of kept winning, like defying odds. Like they seemed bad for a CBLOL team and then just kept persisting. So look, maybe they're better this year. I don't even know if they have the same roster at this point. But I'm gonna have a hard time swallowing that between personal grudges and and where they're coming from.
The general consensus is that Tinones is probably the best player in Brazil, and BRTT is the most popular player in Brazil. BRTT is like my age. Like he's like 29 or 30 right now, and he's still playing.
Is his name like a gun? Back to our onomatopoeia names. He's like you're shooting a gun.
I honestly don't know. That'd be really cool if it was. I completely forget. But he basically I think he started off as a streamer, turned professional gamer. Is like extremely popular in Brazil. Like has transcended esports. I think is the point that he's at. But he's been around forever. He's an okay player. He's not. And that kind of speaks to their playstyle. Like, you have this well-known, good enough player who wants their team to slow everything down in the early game and the middle game so that you can get into those one or two fights in the late game where they can have their chance to shine. Because, like, yes, League of Legends is a mechanically intense game, but if you can work your way around the early and mid-game, limit the number of interactions you have with the enemy team, and get yourself into a spot where you're within a couple thousand gold, even if you're losing, you can win one or two really good fights and then win. I think that's kind of what their play style is more generally. So
makes sense. I mean, and we got into that a little bit on the last stream, right? Sort of whether that's sort of more, which style, whether hyper aggressive or hyper conservative is sort of the fragile, and which one's the anti-fragile.
Yeah.
But I guess on the from a continuity standpoint, same roster, going back to basically the beginning. Oh no, sorry. I forget which team Lucy was on last year, but he was definitely in the mix and came in somewhere mid-season. He was on Flamengo last year, but so they swapped out their support. But otherwise, the four other guys played together all last year as well. So
yeah,
they have that going for them.
The other thing I know about the Wildcats is that they play a lot of Senna compositions. So if you have a team that plays a lot of Senna compositions going against a team that's going to be low interactions, try to outscale you, if they give away Senna, you're going to still outscale them. So their win condition of like playing slow, go for one team fight, the chance of them winning that team fight is even lower because they're not the team with Senna. So that's a good spot there. And then last but not least, probably the second most interesting matchup from a narrative perspective is Mad Lions against PSG Talon. Everything that you hear about PSG Talon is very positive right now. PSG Talon is the team from Worlds that had their entire roster like unable to go to the tournament for some reason, so they had a lot of subs, and they ended up performing really well, which was crazy to me because I mean I'm one of those people I think that was basically saying, well, they have a bunch of substitutes. It's going to be really tough for them to compete with a lot of these teams. We're not going to know enough about them until the games are starting. They started playing really well, and then it started to be so obvious. It was like, okay, their jungler is an Echo one-trick, and that's a pretty mechanically intense champion. He can probably play all these other champions that are really strong right now. So you need to be willing to, eat crow, pivot, get onto the good teams once you realize who they are. My concern is that I'm negative towards Mad Lions in general, and I want to be against them. But right now you have this extremely positive PSG Talon narrative. You have extremely positive narrative surrounding Mad Lions coming off of their win in Europe. Like I'm in a no-win situation where one of these teams has to win, and one of those stupid narratives is going to be fulfilled when they play tomorrow. So the the reality of the situation is that I'm going to play both sides of this match because it's the last game. It's going to give you a lot of chances to make lineups that are alive for most of the day, which is just some. I mean, whether or not people admit it, like that's a thing that people do. With PSG Talon, they're so cheap on DraftKings. You can fit them in with Dom1 Gaming RNG. That's going to increase the percent ownership on them by so much. Because you're basically during your roster construction process, you have to ask yourself, do I want Dom1? Do I want RNG? Yes or no? The answer is yes. Then it's, oh, well, who can I fit them with? Oh, shitty underdog, shitty underdog, shitty underdog. Oh, PSG Talent, who has an actual chance to beat Mad Lions. Maybe I'll play that one instead. Because people were complaining about it, but DraftKings did a good job with salary on this one. Like you can't even do support combinations, I think, with Dom1 Gaming and RNG, which is it's nice. It's forcing people to make other kinds of decisions, and that's always good, in my opinion. This is another spot where I think if we think about the jungle matchup, River is a good player. Maple is a very good player. Was always one of the best players. When they were on Flash Wolves and stuff like that, they were very good with Karsa. So Karsa and Maple for a long time were like the two best players in their region. They both went to the LPL. Karsa has had a lot of success because he's been fortunate with the teams that he's on. Maple has not been fortunate because of the teams that they've played on. So in reality, Maple is a very good player. Just hasn't been on good teams, makes people think less of him. I think that in advantageous matchups, Maple can be a very good player still. So I think River plus Maple has good chances to just be straight up better than El Yoya and Humanoid. El Yoya is probably the most overrated player in Europe right now. Whether or not he's good for a long amount of time, like forget about that for a second. People think that El Yoya is like the second or third best jungler in Europe. Complete nonsense. If you took El Yoya and, in my opinion, Shadow, the guy that he replaced, and put him into a future meta where Kindred and Lee Sin are two of the most important champions in the game, I think Shadow would be just a better player. Like, Shadow's Lee Sin is why they were so good last year. So that I'm just kind of frustrated about that. He's been really kind of screwed. He's like not even on an EU Masters team. Like, I don't know what happened to that guy. He probably just gave up the game, which kind of sucks.
He's a Valorant player now.
Is he really?
No, I'm just
that'd be pretty funny if he actually was. So what are you thinking about these two matches? Like, is there an ego angle for this, or?
It's another one where I want to see where things come out a little bit. I think that Mad Lions, and I guess really on the PSG side there, I think Mad Lions is overrated in the ego rankings right now because of how strong they closed the season. They're probably at the or closer to the peak of where they've been, right? So they spent most of the season. So if you do like a look back 10 games ago, they're maybe at like a 2,000 above average gold level, and they finished the season at 3,400 because they won the league and did so in decent, relatively impressive fashion. So I think that will just because everything I do so much just sort of quantitatively driven that will put a decent amount of Mad Lions in my lineups. But I do like the PSG side. As I said, I agree with you that they're overrated. As a team, I think LEC is probably overrated as a region. I think we saw that at Worlds last year that they sort of underperformed. And it just feels like, I don't know, just sort of my sense. I could be completely wrong on that. And on the flip side, as I said, the Southeast Asian sort of region, BCS, PCS, and related or leagues that sort of have predecessed them, have been just below, with the TCL of the top region teams. Mm-hmm. So I think, right, if you take a good team from that region, that's sort of, I think, a great target. The price disappoints me a little bit. I didn't know they were that cheap. I almost wish they were a little bit more expensive.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
But I definitely will have a lot. I have a feeling, unless they're a really slow team and I don't realize it yet.
They shouldn't be.
I think I'm gonna have a ton of RNG, PSG, and DWG PSG lineups.
Yeah, that's what sucks. Like, if you, before going into this, if you thought that DraftKings was going to like try to avoid certain combinations of teams because the narratives are going to push people there anyways, then yes, PSG Talon would be more expensive. I think it's way too easy to fit them into lineups, which is why like you're going to have to move off of RNG or Damwon Gaming, or you're going to be duplicated like a bajillion times. So you're going to have to find those other kinds of constructions too.
Right, and then it's like, yeah, I'll have to look at pricing, right? Because it's like you're not going to move to Mad Lions, obviously. So like what? So you're basically, your choices are basically play the chalk or leave a ton of money on the table.
Yeah,
and I, in there.
And I think I do think that this is the kind of slate where like this used to be my bread and butter back in the day, where the limit on entries was like 17. So I'd be like, okay, everyone else is going to play all the really chalky stuff. I'm going to take a bunch of combinations of teams that leave a bunch of salary on the table, and if those two teams win, then I'm going to win. Because it's a very easy spot where you think to yourself, okay, if we just go through the games again real quick. Dom1 Gaming and Cloud9 disappoints. It goes underscoring because, even though Dom1 is saying a lot about like, oh, I want to kill perks on stage and all that kind of stuff, in reality, they want to win the game and take home the prize money. So I was like, okay, we beat you guys 14-6 or 16-7 or something like that. They just move on with their lives. Cool. Then you have Detonation Focus Me against Infinity. You're like, okay, two teams we don't really know a ton about. By the way, anybody telling you that they know a lot about these teams, they're lying to you. In reality, it's extremely difficult to think like to take their performance from their region and put it into context on like an international stage, which is why things like the quantitative analysis from EGOT is useful, or the qualitative stuff of looking at their champion pools and stuff, because you need to pick a starting point, and create an opinion. But once you put the two teams on the Rift, if the draft conditions are correct and the two teams are willing to fight, you can just have a really good DraftKings game. So I would rather not even think about all of the minutia and just say to myself, could Detonation Focus Me be the highest scoring team 20% of the time? If yes, then I'm going to play a bunch of them and just hope that I'm right, because that is a way to win a lot of money. It's not the most thoughtful way to win a lot of money, but it's a valid way to get there. RNG against Pentanet. No one's playing Pentanet. RNG is going to be highly owned for that reason. So it's like, is Pentanet going to let RNG kill them a million times in the game? Is RNG that big of trolls where they're just going to run up the score on Pentanet? Honestly, I think the answer is yes. I think that's going to be super scary. Like, if we get favorite Dom1 wins, favorite Detonation Focus Me wins, favorite RNG wins, then we get into Istanbul against Pan Gaming. Like, if Istanbul wins, and then we're going into the last game, and PSG Talent, all they have to do is put up a respectable performance, and then RNG chalk hits, that's going to be so tilting. That's the thing that I think is going to happen. So I think I do have some of those lineups as well to like cover that base and hope that I'm wrong and people aren't all over PSG Talent, because that seems like that seems like the easiest way to play the slate. So playing Mad Lions might even be contrarian, and if that's the case, you need to figure out ways to combine them with Detonation Focus Me, and then Istanbul Wildcats or Pain Gaming. Like, you need to dip into those other games to get unique lineups, I think.
I think that makes sense. I think the two numbers I'll throw out that support that. If you look at, so I guess one, I think maybe just the curveball here, right? In slates with 4+ games, or I guess even 3+ games, you see basically twice as many 4-2-1 lineups win. So I think that's a viable option here, right? Just find one cheap guy you like, and you could get it. And the biggest thing for me with the 4-2-1s is how much you can differentiate. Just the number when you're dropping from a 4-3 to a 4-2-1, the number of
dupes
options just go up, exponentially.
Oh yeah, sure, that too.
And then the other piece is that really gets to your point. In one game slates, 4 matches or more, only less than 50% of winning lineups, and this is like, I guess this is just this slate, this piece of it, but less than 50% of winning lineups had 49.5 or more. Less than 70% had 48.5 or more. Less than 80% had 47.5 or more. So leaving money on the table is definitely a viable option.
Yeah,
you just need to get the two hot teams, and it might be the two.
it might be two dogs. It might be a double dog day. That
Exactly.
happens. The thing I would say about 4-2-1s, and I think this is kind of the point that people miss sometimes, there are two ways that 4-2-1s can hit. You either have three teams that have pretty similar kill scores, and you get like the carry from three individual games. That's like the one of the best ways to play. If all 5 games had like like individual standout performances in different roles, then yes, you could have some kind of like absurd team comp or roster construction where it's like 80 carry from team 1, top laner from team 2, jungle from team 3, mid laner from team 4, a different 80 carry, and then fill in support and 80 carry or support and team slot from another one of those teams. Like that's theoretically possible, and it'd be really cool if that was actually like a plus EV way to play the game, but it's just not. So you go to something like 4-2-1 where it's either you get three carries, good for you. That's like the nut way to play that. Or the other way is that it just gets you just enough savings to play the two best teams. Because if you cannot fit the two best teams, the two biggest favorites together, but by including a third team, you sneak one of those really high, like 4-3 lineups in, where it's like a 4-3 RNG Damwon Gaming, but instead of the team slot from one of those two teams, you take the team slot from PSG Talon or something, and somehow that fits, then it's a good lineup. That's kind of the other way. And even if PSG Talon loses, if Damwon and RNG are the two highest scoring teams on the slate, there needs to be that inflection point where like you get just enough points from that losing team. That's the way to backdoor cover that one. So before we leave, let's do the tier list. So I think that we'll just go on a team by team basis and we'll kind of just wing it. So Damwon Gaming, they're in the S tier. I think we should just say, they're the best team in the tournament. For starters, you can make a good argument RNG against Damwon Gaming, and think like stylistically, how do they match up with one another? I think I would still take Damwon Gaming, but the argument's really like, do you include RNG in the S tier or do you put them in the A tier? I would say probably put them in the S tier as well.
I agree. I think from an ego perspective, I can't even eyeball it. It's going to be that close between these two teams. DBG rates a little bit better in the LCK, but the LPL as a league rates overall. So I think with the adjustment, they'll be neck and neck. Mm-hmm. I think if we were doing sort of as we did before Worlds last year, sort of every team in the world, I think maybe you could sort of maybe differentiate these two, arguably. But on sort of a MSI, these 11 teams basis, I think those are the two clear S tiers.
Yeah. So do you think any of the other teams in the tournament can be put in the same conversation with them? Personally, I don't think so.
No.
Okay, so then the question is, how far away are the other teams? Do you think they're 1 tier below or 2 tiers below? I think that they're all 2 tiers below, or worse. But I think that like when separating them into a tier list, I would say like the A tier could be teams that could theoretically maybe be competitive with them in a perfect world if they're drafting impeccably, if they're playing really well, if they have good matchups for some reason. That's the only way it's even interesting, I think.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think my ego numbers will say that Mad Lions is an A tier team and Cloud9 is probably a B tier team, but my gut says the opposite. That Cloud9 is, if there is an A tier team, it's Cloud9, mm-hmm. and then Mad Lions is probably slotted in behind them.
Yes. So since your gut is saying that, and my gut is also saying that, that's what we should do. I genuinely, even if Cloud9 has a bad performance, I think that the talent that they have on their roster is unquestionable. Fudge is still a question mark. I'm not convinced that Fudge will be a great player.
I think I meant to say this earlier, but I think that's the other big piece of the conversation, at least for tomorrow, right? Like people got over that Fudge isn't that all that good, or not that he's not that good, but right, that Fudge is too young, that he needs more time, that type of stuff, very quickly as Cloud9 sort of came on and found themselves. But it's not necessarily the case, right? It playing, Finn and whoever, or not Finn, Niles and crew is a lot different than going up against Khan.
Yeah. Honestly, there's probably nothing that I hate more than listening to like the on-air talent of the LCS talk about developing players and stuff like that. Do you understand that we have 17-year-olds in China and Korea completely shitting on professional players? Like, where do you think we are going to find these North American players and develop them? Do you think we're going to take an 18, 19, 20-year-old and teach them how to play League of Legends to beat those people? The answer is you're not. You're not going to do that. The dream scenario for North America, which this would be a very cool business idea, you take like 20 to 30 15 and 16-year-olds who are very good at League of Legends. You pay for them to go live in Korea or China for a year or two until they can become professionally eligible. And then you bring them back to North America. You want to compete? That's what you have to do. Nobody's going to do that, so the gap's going to stay there for a pretty long time. You need these outlier players like Blabber, or, find people like Perks and just get lucky and find 5 of those people somehow, get them onto the same team, and maybe that'll be good enough. But the idea that we can take a 19, 20-year-old and turn them into a world caliber player is just insane. It just doesn't happen. All right.
Yeah, enough. I have a lot of questions there, but it's a whole other conversation.
Yeah.
So we can save it for the time.
Yeah, let's finish this and then maybe we get into that. Okay, so next up, I think that the team we should be talking about is PSG Talon. So PSG Talon relative to Mad Lions and Cloud9. If all this information about PSG Talon wasn't being leaked, that they're like really competitive in all their scrims and like all this kind of stuff, I would have probably been putting them ahead of Mad Lions anyways. I don't believe in Mad Lions. I think they had a great run, but I don't think it's really sustainable. I like Carzzy a lot. I think he's a very good player. I think Azael was talking shit about him on the Dive podcast, which was kind of surprising to me. He is the heart and soul of that team. Carzzy and the plays that he's willing to make is very similar to Jackie Love in terms of like he's willing to try to put the team on his back. Is he going to fall on his face? Yes. But at least he's trying. Like that's the biggest separator for me is are these players willing to make these absurd plays that will look terrible if they get it wrong, because it gives you such higher upside, and it can take a losing position and turn it into a winning position. And that's not something you can teach. You kind of have to like be able to see it and just act on it. So I would be comfortable putting Mad Lions and PSG next to each other, which I think is how most people's tier lists are kind of shaping up to begin with. Which is kind of sad.
Yeah, I probably can't get there. I just think my numbers are smarter than me, and they're gonna put Mad Lions well above them. Mm-hmm. I certainly agree. PSG is in the next is the next team up here, and I'm just looking at sort of the raw win losses now. I'll be interested to see how Istanbul grades out. I could see them being very close to PSG in my numbers when all's said and done.
Yeah. Okay. Next,
PSG 17-1. I just saw in the regular season, so they might be pretty elite here.
So I guess the question becomes like, okay, PSG had some subs, went to Worlds, still competed. They were still pretty good. Like, how much better could they really be?
And I guess I don't really know what to make of that, because Uniboy was one of the subs, right? And then went on to like a higher region team. So it almost like they got subs from decent teams, right? It wasn't like they just pulled some. It wasn't like they pulled me off of like solo queue and were like, that's buddy, right? Yeah. So that like, but at the same time, right? There's the synergy aspect and everything else. So if like you certainly wouldn't expect them to be better with somebody just sort of showing up off the street. Mm-hmm. So it's a valid question.
Yeah, that's the issue though. Is like that's the kind of signing where it's like. He played really good in one tournament. Like, it probably wasn't even him that created the wins in those games, but he was the one playing mid or 80 carry and somebody
even
took
so,
a chance on it.
right? Like once teams figured out what was going on, and it wasn't like just a complete surprise, like what the hell to expect here. Like they were even questioning probably like played roles or like what people are going to do, and maybe not like role, but sort of
Yeah.
What type of champ they're going to play.
Yeah, what's their function within the team? Like, are they being asked to be the shot caller? Are they being asked to make the game-changing plays on their team? Or are they kind of just there clicking buttons? Which,
exactly,
that's most people. All right, so next up, we have really 3 teams. So right now we have Damwon Gaming and RNG in the S tier, Cloud9 alone in A tier, Mad Lions alone in B tier, PSG alone in the C tier. So the 3 teams that we have to question, like, can they also be in PSG Talon's stratosphere, is Unicorns of Love, Detonation Focus Me, and Istanbul Wildcats. So just before you go, my gut would say that Unicorns of Love is better than Istanbul, and then Detonation Focus Me is like, that's the thing that can kind of change everything. I think that their upside is being better than Mad Lions. Their downside is being in the bottom tier, like what Ego is saying.
That makes sense to me. Just trying to get a rough sense of how these teams form in their net. I mean, Pentanet was 13-1 in the OCL. Detonation Focus was 12-2. Pain Gaming was 11-7 in the CVLOL.
Yeah, they were the 5th seed going into playoffs. They had a good run in playoffs.
And Infinity was 10-4. Yeah, so I probably, as I said, I think I'll probably end up with PSG and Istanbul in the same tier, probably PSG ahead of them. And then I think, I think the Unicorns of Love after that, but maybe a tier down. I didn't look at how they did in the LCL.
Okay, so then I'll finish out my tier list with the rest of the teams, and then we can talk about like mobility within tiers and stuff like that if you want to look at any more stuff. So I think that Pain Gaming and Pentanet are most likely the 2 worst teams at the tournament, just based off of what we know about the teams in the regions. So I would say I'd be very comfortable putting Pain Gaming in the D tier with Pentanet. Infinity is a team that I think is interesting just because we don't know a lot about most of these players. We haven't seen them compete internationally. So for Gillette Infinity, they could be D tier easily, and it's just like, okay, well, they actually just suck. So they could be as low as D tier. There is a distinct possibility that they're better than all of the like lesser region teams. Like if they went out and beat Detonation Focus Me, it would suck for me. I would lose money. But like, would I be that surprised like for a team to show up to an international competition in a best of 1 situation and get a win? No, I could see that happening. Then if they go up against a team, who else is in their group? If they go up against, if they go up against Damwon, are they going to win? No, they're going to lose. If they go up against Cloud9, could they win? I think that they could theoretically win against Cloud9, but like, how much of a limb can you really go out on for Infinity Esports? Because it's like, in the best case scenario, I'm right about them beating Cloud9, like once out of this whole thing. Like, maybe I can justify getting them into 5% of my lineups the day that they play against C9. But, like, I'm not picking them against Damwon. And I'm not even picking them against Detonation Focus Me. So, which I probably should. You should probably have exposure to Infinity tomorrow for that reason. Between, like, how they probably fit in with other teams, plus the high likelihood that they'll be in lower duplicated lineups.
I think I'm with you on that. I feel like I like them better in that matchup than you might.
Yeah, it's easy to get your head in a space where it's like, yeah, they're the underdog. People generally have a lesser opinion of Latin American region than Asia more generally, but like even LJL team, like people have a high opinion of Detonation Focus Me, because they've been somewhat dominant in their region for a long time. But it's a best of one, so like that's a good. That's why, like, even though it might be a 5 or 10% exposure team for most people when they're building lineups, if you want to go 15-20% and just tell yourself the story about like they have one good game, it'll be very different from everyone else. It'll make you very live to come in first place alone. That alone is worth taking a risk on them.
Yeah, absolutely right. I mean, it's a little bit of a broken record, but in a one game series, right, you just need sort of one snowball to get a win. And at the end of the day, if one of these really good teams goes 5-1 in groups and goes on to win the whole thing, no one will even think about it, but it could win you a slate.
Exactly, and that's all we're trying to do. Is win a little bit of money on one of these slates. Okay, and then let's just go through the tier list one more time. So Dom1 and RNG, I'm fine leaving them both alone in the S tier. I'm fine with either one being the first place team. I think there's good arguments to be made for both. You agree?
Yeah.
Yeah. Next up, Cloud9. Both of our guts say that. Ego is saying that Mad Lions will probably be better than them, but I think that we both agree that C9 Mad Lions should be the next two. Maybe PSG Talon can get above Mad Lions, but I wouldn't put them above Cloud9 until we start seeing them dominate people in this tournament again. And even if they do, like, even if they come out of their group as like the number one team over Mad Lions, when they get into the next round, I'm still gonna pick C9 over them if they play against each other. You know, it's gonna be really tough to have them winning that group fundamentally change my opinion of them. So like the best case scenario is already kind of assumed that it's in their range of outcomes when maybe it's not.
Yeah, like all of those teams would be a bottom tier team in the LEC, even if you're taking them at the LEC at a discount to what it has historically been on an international level. So yeah, I don't think we get a true test of them until they play one of the other major region teams, even if they do handle PSG.
Yeah, it's a very good point that you just made, because it's like if you swapped out the team names in their group to like Vitality, would you be like, oh my god, PSG Talent slapped Vitality, they're gonna go and beat Dom1 Gaming? It's like, well, did you hear what you just said? You kind of sound insane. Are you okay?
Right. Yeah, Misfits Vitality, and
well, don't talk about Misfits. Don't talk about Misfits. We don't need to drag Misfits through the dirt anymore. They've kind of crushed everyone's hearts that watches my videos.
Yeah, fair enough. But you get those three teams in there with Istanbul, Pain, and PSG, and it's like you're probably picking one of those LEC teams to win it anyway. So Mad Lions should clearly be able to handle this, and if they don't, that's probably noteworthy.
Yeah. So PSG Talon is the next team. We think that, again, their best case scenario is being better than Mad Lions. I mean, maybe they could be competitive with C9. We just don't know that yet. Istanbul Wildcats, big question mark. The rest of the teams are even bigger question marks than a team like PSG. So, like, with Istanbul, we have to think to ourselves, is their region actually good, or is their region overrated because they've sent out a couple of good players? I probably lean in that direction. So if we get through the group stage and we have Unicorns of Love just looking better than them, Detonation Focus Me looking better than them, and even Gillette Infinity looking better than them, where like Istanbul drops into the D tier, it really wouldn't surprise me. And like that could be explained away with like a bad tournament. Maybe they are a legitimate team and come back to like the world's play-ins and we have to reevaluate how good we think they are. But it's going to be really tough for me to put like a lot of money behind them thinking that they're a great team, as opposed to like they could be a good DraftKings play and still be not a great team. Like,
sure,
I'm not going to try to convince myself they're a good team. They're just a team that I might win money with on DraftKings.
That's fair. I think at least at this point, we'll see where this all shakes out. I'm getting closer to having something to post here, probably a little bit after this video. But I think they're going to end up being pretty close to PSG in my numbers. But I think it'll be interesting to see if that is warranted for all the reasons you just said.
Yeah, and it's a huge cop-out, but I guarantee you, after I watch these games tomorrow, my opinion on some of these teams will fundamentally change because of the champions they're playing and how they play the game. Like, it's a new patch, new champions, they can theoretically show something that will make me want to completely change my mind about a team. It doesn't happen often where like I just completely abandon my previous position, but it's definitely a possibility, especially in this kind of tournament where you have to adjust quickly. Otherwise, you're just going to be dead the entire group stage. With Unicorns of Love, I've seen enough of Unicorns of Love to be confident picking them every time against Pentanet. I mean, everybody's going to do that. There's not really an edge there. And there's not an edge playing them against RNG. Although I think Unicorns of Love may have actually beaten a Chinese or Korean team. So maybe you get into a spot where you can justify playing like 5% of them if you're playing max entering. Because like, yeah, they will win 1 out of every 20 games. So like, go ahead. Make one or two lineups out of your total allotment. Make them like one as a primary stack, one as a secondary stack with one of the big favorites on the slate. And maybe that helps you get there, or use them as like a one-off in a 4-2-1 if it helps you get the salaries close enough. Because maybe it just turns into a game where Unicorns of Love and RNG have like a high kill score game, and maybe that's good enough if they're the highest scoring loser. So it's definitely something to take into consideration there.
They're sort of like the poor man's Cloud9 for me, in the sense that I think my numbers will say they're good, but my gut says they're better than the numbers say.
Okay. Detonation Focus Me. This is the one I'm kind of taking a stance on for the first day. And even if I'm not convinced by a team's skill, I'll do this sometimes. I'll just pick a spot that I think for like game theory reasons plus their matchup and like a bunch of different factors like that I'll just play overweight because it's a position not a lot of people will take. So I'll be overweight on Detonation Focus Me tomorrow by a somewhat considerable margin, because I know, not that I know, but I feel like there's a very high % chance that a lot of the lineups that I get in are what I would consider high equity roster construction that are overlooked because other teams are more popular or people want to play them more. And I'm willing to take the secondary position because those other lineups are going to be duplicated like 50 times. They're going to be a tough one to understand how good they are until we see at least 1 or 2 games. Gillette, and then the rest of them are, it's really, we have no clue what the last 3 teams are. I mean, in reality, I don't know who Istanbul is. I don't know Detonation Focus Me. I don't know Gillette. I don't know Pain Gaming. I don't know Pentanet. I haven't watched enough games of them. It's really tough to put their ability into some kind of like appropriate context where I can feel really comfortable about saying like this team is much better for these reasons. Like I'm willing to go out there and put my money on the line because I looked at jungle pools. I have so I kind of have a sense of what kinds of players they are, and then you have the public sentiment about the teams. That's all we have right now.
Yeah.
And the betting markets, I guess. We have that too.
Yeah, it's certainly finger in the wind a little bit. I feel pretty good about Istanbul. I think between the region and their performance in the region, that I think they'll be one of the sort of mid-tier teams. I think Pain I'm pretty low on. I think sort of bad region, poor performance within the region, sort of the opposite case there. Mm-hmm. And then the other two, I think I'm with you. I think it'll be sort of see as we go here. Particularly with the reformation of the Oceanic League, probably a little bit more confidence for that reason, and given what they've done in Infinity than in Pentanet. But Pentanet did have an impressive performance. So if the Oceanic sort of reformulated region is stronger than we expect, maybe they're better than we realize.
Yeah, I guess the last thing that I'll say before we wrap things up is the thing that is going to be annoying is when we get out of the first group stage, a lot of people will want to take victory laps on saying like, oh, Unicorns of Love is good because they got out of the group stage. It's like they had to finish in 2nd out of 3 teams. Like that's not doing anything. That's my concern with the Istanbul Wildcats, Mad Lions, and PSG Talon is that 2 of those teams will most likely make it out of that group no matter what. So it doesn't matter who you were on. Like that's a live outcome because you basically just have to be not the 3rd worst team in the group or like have the 3rd worst performance. in Group C, like Infinity Esports, the chance of them getting out of the group seems basically like zero. Like, can they be better than Detonation Focus Me? Yeah, that's a real possibility. Are they going to be better than Cloud9? That would be shocking to me. And if they're better than Dom1 Gaming, then League of Legends is about to go through like an insane transformation where like Latin America is thought of as like a great region. That'd be pretty cool, but you know, we have no reason to think that's the case right now.
Yeah, I'm not going to go ahead and bet on that tomorrow.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so that's basically it. A relatively long video, but good information as per usual. Hopefully, we can make a couple more of these during MSI. Get some updates on Ego and stuff like that. And even if you can't jump on, I'll be using that if I make some videos for the YouTubes. So Billy, thanks once again for joining me tonight. Any last words before I sign off?
Thanks for having me, and excited to have some League of Legends back in our lives. I love these like midweek tournaments. Get a little something going on in the background at work, and space out for a few minutes.
The 9 a.m. start time is great. It's like, wow, this is perfect.
Exactly.
Yeah. All right. Well, let's go Detonation Focus Me. Win me some money tomorrow. Good luck, everybody. Thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you later.